Hey guys, Peter here to do an album review. Today I'm here to tell you about the latest from Frozen Crown, Winterbane, out April 23rd on Scarlet Records. This album has 10 tracks, 53 minutes in length, and this is the band's third full-length studio album. They are an Italian power metal band. Now I want to start off this album review by talking about the structure, which in my opinion is the weakest spot on this record. This is an album that doesn't have peaks and valleys. It doesn't have abrupt changes from song to song. It's very fluid, very dynamic, but stays very linear at the same time. The tracks offer a very similar soundscape, a very similar approach, a very similar structure within the songs themselves, then obviously that permeates to the overall structure of the album. And this is true for the first 2/3 of the record. The first 2/3 of the record are very tight, very concise, very cohesive, very linear, like I said, and allows you to really get into the album, offering you slight changes, enough to keep you there and not letting you walk away from it. But then comes the last third of the album, and to me this is where the wheels kind of fall off, because you have Nightcrawler, a Judas Priest cover, then you have an instrumental track, and then you finish off the album with Blood on the Snow, the longest track on the record, that falls a little bit short of being almost a Stradivarius style track. You needed a few more prog elements in order to really fall into that camp, but it's very close. These three songs don't really work well together, and they don't really work well with the picture of the record, because the record paints one picture for the first 2/3, and then it paints a completely different picture in the last third. These three songs could totally fit in an EP, but on this album, to close off, I think you needed something else there. You needed something that continue with the strength and the elements that were already present in the first 2/3. You needed something that expanded that, and if you're going to include some of these songs in that last portion, I don't think one can coexist with the other. If you're going to have Nightcrawler, you have to have Nightcrawler as the closing track of the album. If you're going to have Blood on the Snow, you need to have that one as the closing track on the album, but then you can't have Nightcrawler in it. The combination of these three songs really creates a little bit of chaos at the end of this album, and it throws you for a loop, and it kind of destroys everything in terms of the fluidity that the record had up until that point, because of the volatility and the difference of approach, the difference of execution that these three songs bring to the table. That is my main problem with this record. When you listen to it from the first to the last song, you just feel like you listen to a record and then you listen to an EP that's attached to that record. That's kind of the vibe that I got. Now, once you get into the soundscape, you're definitely going to get an album that mixes power metal and classic heavy metal. There's elements of both. They're both alive and well throughout this album, and they give a lot of power, a lot of strength to the album. But from a soundscape perspective, this is not a guitar-driven album. I was expecting it to be more guitar-driven, and it's not. The soundscape is really driven by the combination of all the different elements, the bass, the drums, and the guitars. They're all working well together, and this is an album that has a really great sound from that perspective. One element doesn't overshadow the others, but they're all working together, and there's now one pushing to the forefront and really dictating the speed, the tempo, or asking for the spotlight as far as the soundscape is concerned. What's really asking for the spotlight are the vocals. They're the motor behind this record, and I'll talk more about it in a minute. Now, within that soundscape, there are still two elements that jump into the forefront as far as being the pillars of the overall sound experience on the album, and they are the drums and guitars. I like the drums because they're very cohesive, they're very tight, and they're very consistent from the first almost to the last song. Obviously, there's variations in the last portion of the record, I already mentioned that, but outside of that, the drums are very consistent in the approach, very consistent in the execution, and also very consistent in terms of what they have to offer to the album. They ground the sound, they ground the record, they give enough depth to the overall experience, and they're really one of the main elements that allows this album to stay on its path across most of its entirety. And this is an important aspect for a record that has this kind of power, strength, and intensity. Then you get into the guitars. I love the guitar sound on this album, and I was expecting it to be strong based on the singles that they released. I mean, this band has gone through lineup changes, so there's always this idea that how are these changes going to impact the overall experience of the album? If you're looking at the guitars, nothing has been missed. I just feel like this is a very strong album from that perspective. The guitars are very powerful. The solo sections are incredibly written, incredibly executed, really powerful, filled with intensity, filled with intent, and melody, and just a lot of sound that really permeates throughout the guitars and throughout the overall experience. I don't feel like they jump into the forefront of anything else, but they add to the overall wall of sound that the record has, and that wall of sound stays consistent throughout the album. And this is one of the main elements, is that this is a record that really lives off of the strength of the individuals, but how they come together as one, and not necessarily allowing you to have one superstar and a bunch of co-pilots. That's not the way this album is designed. That's not how this album is executed. But overall, I really love the guitar sound, the approach, and how they give life and energy to the song, specifically with the solos. The solos are really well done, really well executed. Above all else, you have the vocals. I already mentioned that this is an album that's driven by the vocals more than anything else. The vocals are really the ones pushing themselves into the forefront, being the driver, the steering wheel, the gas pedal, the wheels, everything. The vocals are really the be all and end all of this record. It really feels like the album was built around the vocals, and the vocals are there as the pedestal that the record sits on, not the other way around. This doesn't feel to me like this is an album where the vocals are there in order to enhance the experience of the record, enhance the experience of telling a story within the lyrics. It's really the other way around. The album is there to serve the vocals, not the vocals are there to serve the record, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the feel that I got listening to this album in terms of how it was mixed and how it is delivered. Overall, from a vocal perspective, I like Jade's vocals. I mean, she's phenomenal. She can do no wrong. And on this album, there's a few times where you're going to get some male harsh vocals. There's a couple of songs where that happens. I don't even think that you need that. Her voice is so strong, it's so beautiful. She has such an incredible, powerful voice that she can do it all on her own. Now, one element of this album that I really enjoyed as far as the vocals are concerned is the backing vocals, the layers that they use, specifically in some of the chorus, sometimes outside of the chorus, and some of the verses, sometimes really fainted. You really have to pay attention in order to feel the backing vocals, the layers that they used on the vocal tracks. But I felt like it was an important element from a perspective of giving strength, of giving power, of making the vocals overall sound bigger, because she has an incredible range, she has an incredible power, but she drives the tracks, and sometimes you need to ground them a little bit, and you can't depend just on the drums and the bass to do that. Sometimes you need to have the vocals ground the songs a little bit, and by adding vocal layers, by adding a little bit of backing vocals, they did that from that perspective, and I thought that complemented the album really well. Overall, this is an interesting album. It doesn't feel like a third record. It feels like a debut album. I mean, the whole lineup of the band has been revamped, so this is pretty much a brand new lineup, so it feels like a brand new record. They have tons of talent, but this feels like a very safe album. They didn't try to take too many chances. They try to play it as safe as possible, stay within their comfort zone, stay within an area that they feel like they can excel, that they can do really well. But I hope they look at going a little bit more beyond that and look outside the box. Like I said earlier, a song like Blood on the Snow really calls for some more prog elements in it to give it almost that Stradivarius vibe to it. And they were very close to it, but they just didn't get there. But I think the talent is there, the tools are there. The question is going to be, are they going to move more into that direction? And I really think that they should. I think they need to expand a little bit the palette of their sound, the palette of their approach, the palette of their construction, and start to create their own fingerprint and their own DNA, and not be afraid of taking some risks. This is their third album. They're going to go into their fourth album in the future with a lineup this strong. Sky is the limit. But this album feels very safe from an overall perspective. Going into the individual tracks, as far as my favorite songs are concerned, I want to start off with Embrace the Night. Great guitar riff. The powerful drums really help this song. It really helps the guitars move forward. They create this incredible combo, one really complementing the other. The vocals jump in and start to drive the song. This is true on every track, but feels even more so on this one. This is the opening track of the album, a song that's going to give you a glimpse, musically and vocally, of everything that you're going to get throughout the record. The chorus brings in some melody and some brightness. Musically and vocally, it just feels a lot looser, it feels a lot brighter, a lot lighter, if you will, and that it creates this dynamic that the song has of having two different approaches. The verses and the chorus is really a song that's divided between those two different worlds, but with a great solo section, the song becomes full, it becomes complete. I love this track. I love that the fact that it's the opening track, because like I said, it really gives you a glimpse of everything the album has to offer. Next, The Water Dancer, a more folkier style song. I really like the approach in this track because it still has great melody, it still has great sound, it feels very jovial. It's a very light-hearted style track, but the opening keyboard on this track really gives a little bit of a folky vibe, and then that folky vibe stays there with the guitar riff every time the riff goes in towards that melody that the keyboard had. So every time that melody comes to the forefront, the song suddenly feels a little bit more folkier. It's not there throughout the whole track. It comes in, it goes out, it comes in, it goes out. When it goes away, the song becomes slightly heavier, slightly chunkier, picks up a little bit more weight, if you will. But when it comes back in, it feels once again a lot more folkier, a lot more jovial. I really like this track because it's super dynamic, it changes a lot, it doesn't stay still with one style, with one approach, it moves all over the place, but it doesn't lose itself within itself, it stays very grounded. Last but not least, Nightcrawler. I love this Judas Priest cover, and I know I'm going to upset a lot of Judas Priest fans out there, but I prefer this cover over the original. It has more power, it's more driven. The vocals are incredible. They push the song forward with such intensity, such raw power. It's just an incredible song. They really took the original and they turned it all the way to 11. That's exactly how it feels. I don't think you can walk away or you can walk around it without saying that it just feels like musically the song has a lot more strength, a lot more power, feels a lot heavier, and therefore it just makes the song feel like it's more robust overall. And then when you add the vocals to it, Jade's vocals are absolutely outstanding on this track. She pushes the knob. She turns the knob all the way to 11, even on the vocals. She just has a lot of strength as well. And when you match that strength of her vocals with the strength that the sound of the track brings to the forefront, this is a magnificent cover all around. I just love this song. I love what they did. Once again, I just don't think it really fits within this album, but overall is still a great track. One of my favorite songs on the album for sure. This is it. Frozen Crown with Winterbane, out April 23rd on Scarlet Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use this comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.